Writing prompt. After being chosen in an elaborate contest and ritual, the Grand Sorcerer defeated you and banished you to the Dark Realm for 1,000 years. When you finally return to defeat the new Grand Sorcerer, you discover that the position has since devolved into a largely ceremonial and bureaucratic role. The Return by user Charlotte Idyllwild. 1,000 years wasn't really that long. Not on the scale of humanity, anyway. The mounds of the Britons were nearly 3,000 years old before the Roman Empire even collapsed. The last pyramid was built 1,000 years after the first. 50 generations of babies learning to smile, youths piecing together a broken heart, crones warming themselves in the sunlight shining on the graves of their husbands, warriors warring, lovers loving, magicians magicking. Here a water wheel, there a crossbow, or the number 0, but still and always peasants in their fields, the merchants in their cities, the monarchs in their palaces. Honestly, it was almost a relief to be banished. Anno Domini 1021 was a mediocre year at best. I didn't care for Byzantium. India and China were more entertaining, but I wasn't there. I was in a prison in Constantinople. At least the architecture was nice. Also nice, the guards outside my cell were visibly terrified. One kept signing the signal to avert the evil eye, incorrectly, and the other trembled whenever he had to come within an arm's reach. They seemed like nice boys. I decided not to curse them. The Grand Sorcerer, conversely, she I would curse. Or would if my hands hadn't been shackled and ironed behind my back, my mouth gagged with an iron bit, and my eyes put out with iron nails. That had been clever of her, I had to admit. The entire setup had been lured into a blacksmithy by a farrier who didn't understand that the gold he had been paid would never be enough to cover the horror of what would happen next. Blind I may be, but not dead. Never dead, no matter how much I wished it, but perhaps being banished would be a nice respite. I didn't struggle as the words washed over me, binding my soul to the darkness beyond. It was cold, but I had been frozen before. It was dark, but I was blind anyway. For now. For 1,000 years. I think she had meant to banish me for longer, but perhaps she realized at the last moment that it would have taken too much out of her, that she wanted to save some for herself to watch her babies learn to smile, watch them piece together their broken hearts, sit by the graveside of her husband in the sun, just as I had done so long ago. I understood. 1,000 years passed quickly. I was ready when the spell broke. It was not gentle. Still blinded, bound, and gagged, I had to force the oxidation of 1,000 years to wrest away my fetters without letting the time touch my flesh. Regrowing, my eyes felt like knives, and I tasted blood. Wherever I was, the floor was cold. When I finally forced my eyes open, I still saw only darkness. As soon as I conjured a light, I heard a scream. Then there was the clatter of somebody carrying many objects, suddenly dropping them and scrambling away. I blinked. I was still in the same cell, but surrounded by things. Indescribable things. Boxes and sheafs of paper I recognized, but nothing else. Some were made of iron and steel. The iron in that alloy still stung, but not like hard iron did. Now the screaming had words. I didn't recognize the language, but the screamer's mind was clear. "Help!" he was screaming. "It's happening! It's happening! God help us!" 2 men ran into my line of sight. The screaming one was young, tall, but chronically stooped. He was wringing his hands and whimpering. The non-screaming one was old and soft, fat around the middle and slack under the arms. His jowls jiggled in horror. I was still recovering my strength, so I said nothing. You, stuttered the old one. Then he pointed at the mage light over my head. "Magic!" he squeaked. I was already growing tired of this. With a word, I locked them like statues. The bars of my prison melted away at a touch. "Who are you?" The young one just squealed incoherently. The old one stammered. I'm the Grand Sorcerer." He sounded like he wasn't sure he could admit to it. I rifled through his mind, his soft, unwarded mind, like a snail pulled from its shelf. He was He was the Grand Sorcerer, but oh, how that had changed. First they had done away with the contest, then they had forbidden women, then they had forgotten that magic was real. The whole world had, and in its absence, marvels, machines, electricities, medicine. I reeled. All that was left was a ritual, conducted entirely by soft little men in sweaty little rooms, half disbelieving their own words and a long-forgotten government pension currently billed to administrative services. They weren't prepared for me to come. Only his cringy little acolyte had even thought to come down during his lunch break to see if the prophecy held any truth. His food lay strewn across the ancient flagstones. It smelled delicious. What spices were those? What were they wearing? What was that music I could hear above? I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. I killed them both with a single word amid my laughter and descended the steps. 1,000 years is a long time. Thanks for listening. This story was recorded with the permission of the author, Charlotte Idyllwild. If you have any suggestions of stories I should look into for reading, feel free to leave a comment. Until next time, have a wonderful day.